Not yet. It is. Good morning. It's Wednesday, February 5th. We're in Senate Agriculture. We are going to start the morning out talking about dairy pricing. We're going to talk with Bob Gray and Bill Rowell. And good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning. Very good. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Who would like to lead off the conversation?
Well, I'd like to introduce my friend, Bob Gray. Bob was, some of you already know Bob, but Bob has been a dairy policy advisor for a good many years and represented the co-ops in the Northeast on the Hill in Washington.
Bill, I'm going to have you introduce yourself just for the people that are watching so they know who you are.
Okay. My name is Bill Rowell. I'm a board member of Vermont Dairy Producer Alliance and a member of Green Mountain Dairy Farm in Sheldon, Franklin County.
Welcome, the floor is yours.
So anyway, Bob is well familiar with the dairy business and the policy, and I thought it'd be wise to have him offer his perspective, maybe to bring some people into the loop, so to speak. And when Bob is done, I'll do my part. But Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yeah, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about dairy policy and related issues. My background is I grew up on a dairy farm in central New York in Cuba County. Our farm was taken for a nuclear power plant siting. The plant was never built. I went to the ag school at Cornell, and I worked with Jim Jeffords, former, of course, Congressman and Senator from Vermont. Jim has passed away, as you all know. And I was his chief of staff when I was on the House Ag Committee. I have very close ties to Vermont. And of course, for years, I worked with now retired Senator Leahy, and of course, now Senator Welch and Senator Bernie Sanders. And I have very close ties to Vermont over the years in working on dairy policy. So I just want to let you know that that's important, and I very much appreciate it, and thank you for letting me talk about dairy policy. I'm sort of a history buff, so I'd like to go back and just talk about how we came through a long chain of changes and legislation that established where we are in dairy policy at this point today on February 5th, 2025. We had, agriculture is really had a lot to do with changing the United States and making it a industrial and commercial power, because in the 1850s, our farmers were so efficient that it allowed people to leave the land and get into other lines of work. Now today we have less than 2%, actually about half of 1% of our people in the United States produce 95% or more of our food. In countries, many countries in the 30s, like for example, Russia, 50% in the 30s of their people were still working in agriculture. So the United States has been very efficient in our farmers in producing food, enough for our people. We've never had a famine, and it's because our farmers and using technology and so forth in their management has been highly successful in producing enough food for all Americans. And of course, now we export food as well. I just want to go back to on dairy policy to the 1920s, because that was a sort of a pivotal year for our dairy cooperatives, as Bill has mentioned, since I represented dairy cooperatives. I'm semi-retired now. I do work with the Northeast Ag Commissioners, and secretaries. I work closely with Anson Tebbets and Allison Eastman and others on their staff in Vermont. But in the 1920s, a little over 102 years ago, in fact, it'll be February 18th, 1922, we passed the Capra-Volstead Act in the House and Senate and Congress, which established, allowed farm commodity groups, including dairy, to establish cooperatives, meaning that farmers could join together and market their own commodities, because before that they were on their own. So a very small dairy farm, maybe 12, 15 head, would be selling their milk to a processor, and the processor might be giving them $2 or $3 a hundredweight for their milk, and then they'd say, well, I can't afford to give you that. The prices are down. I'm going to give you $1.50 a hundredweight. And so, because milk is priced by the hundredweight, and so they would have to take that. They had no chance. There was no choice in doing it. So they started to form cooperatives, and that's why we have cooperatives today, not only in dairy but many other commodities. And that has continued. I represented at the time I was working on the Hill 7 different cooperatives from the Northeast, including Agrimark, St. Albans, Dairy Farmers America, Upstate Niagara, and Cabot, of course. Then they merged with Agrimark, and Cabot, of course, has the best cheddar cheese in the world, and bar none. I have a whole bunch of bars of cheddar cheese from Cabot in my refrigerator, and I get it every year. Keep it in stock. But anyways, that was established in 1922, February 18th, the Capra-Volstead Act, and then that started to have cooperatives, which is a very somewhat of an unusual situation, because the farmers, the dairy farmers, own the cooperative. They have equity in it, and when they retire, they get that equity back over the years from the cooperative. So that's very important. And so that started in the 20s and carried on forward till today, till we have several cooperatives. Although now, as I said, when I started working with the cooperatives back in the 70s, we had 7 in the Northeast. Now we're down to 3. Agrimark, DFA, Upstate Niagara, the 3 big cooperatives in the Northeast, from Maryland to Maine, but there's still a few smaller cooperatives. But anyways, then in the 30s, the late 30s, we developed the federal milk marketing orders. That was passed during the Roosevelt administration, and that set up a system for the utilization of milk as a way to price milk. And it set up 4 classes of milk and the utilization of those classes for pricing. Class 1 being fluid milk, and class 2 being soft products such as cottage cheese, ice cream, yogurt, and so forth. Class 3 being the hard cheeses, such as cheddar and so forth. And class 4 being milk powder and butter. And so that was set up, and so the utilization of that product was established. They would pool the milk and establish a price for each of those products based upon what the sales were. And for Vermont, right now, about 31% of our milk in Vermont is class 1 or fluid milk. 26.7% is class 2 soft products, ice cream, cottage cheese, and yogurt, and so forth. Class 3, the hard cheeses, is 29.7%, and class 4 butter powder is 13.4%. So we produce in Vermont on an annual basis about 2.34 billion pounds of milk a year. Vermont has remained very steady in its production in milk. It's dropped a little bit in the last few years, but it's part of what I call the big three in the Northeast, being New York and Pennsylvania and Vermont. It produces more milk, of course, than can be consumed by the consumers in Vermont. So Vermont ships a lot of its milk out into New England and to down into Massachusetts, Connecticut, and so forth, and Rhode Island. So that was the federal milk marketing orders were a major development in the way milk was priced based upon its utilization. And of course, class one is the highest price because it can be processed very quickly in 24, 48 hours and be on the shelf when it comes from out of the bulk tank, picked up from the dairy producer and pasteurized and homogenized, and then quickly put on the market. Cheese and other products take longer because cheese is aged, and butter takes longer to process, not as long as cheese and so forth. But all the other products have to be processed, and that takes longer, and that means that the price is higher, and that means the cost is more for the co-op. About 70% of our dairy products in the U.S. are sold through our co-ops. The rest are sold by major processors. So, but this has helped our dairy farmers quite a bit. I know there's criticism some of the cooperatives are not getting better prices and so forth, but they work very hard to get as good a price as they can for our dairy farmers. And you could imagine what it'd be like if our dairy producers did not have a co-op representing them to market their milk and to get as best price as possible. And I would add this is very important in terms of marketing, because that's what we're talking about. Just about all of our cooperatives today have their own processing facilities, just like Agrimark has Cabot. They have many other plants. They have plants in Vermont, over Middlebury, and so forth. And they all market and process their own milk. They're not marketing co-ops, meaning that they take in milk and then sell it to a processor. They have their own processing facilities in which they have their own brand, and they sell various different types of products. Little upstate Niagara, which is a smaller co-op out in Western New York, sells over 100 different products that are milk is part of in their processing facilities. Agrimark has expanded its number of dairy products as well, besides well beyond their Cabot cheese, which they're famous for. And Dairy Farmers of America is the biggest co-op in the United States, and it has plants all over the United States, including, of course, in New England. So that moved, the federal milk marketing orders established that system to make sure that farmers were getting the price based upon the utilization and getting the best price based upon what the utilization was. We were a number of years ago in Vermont and in New England, the utilization was rather high. It was in the 45 to 50% range, but it's dropped as utilization of class one of fluid milk went down. And I would add, since I'm a history buff, that started, unfortunately, in the 1950s when a gentleman by the name of Anson Keyes, I shouldn't necessarily call him a gentleman because I've said things about him I wouldn't want to repeat. But anyways, he claimed that milk was would clog your arteries, and he did studies in the 1950s that were actually very flawed, and that hurt the sales of milk, saying the milk fat was not good for you. Subsequent studies in the last 20 years have shown that milk fat is good for a healthy diet. And now milk fat and fluid milk sales are starting to come back. It's slow, but they're coming back, and it's shown that the consumers now have a favorable view of milk fat, and we're getting good milk fat sales. So whole milk and so forth, and we've got healthy milk for Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act in Congress, and which we're trying to restore that back into the school system because all that's available in a lot of the federal nutrition programs is skim milk and low-fat milk, and our kids don't like low-fat and skim milk. They like whole milk, and whole milk is good for you. So that's a very important change in the direction, and I'm hoping it's going to keep up. But we're seeing whole milk sales start to climb, which is very good. So that's very helpful. Excuse me, I gotta shut that phone on. Oh, there we go. So, anyways, that brought us in the late 30s and into the 40s. We started to buy. The federal government had a program in the late 40s after the war, World War II, because we had tremendous sales of product, heavy use of dairy products during World War II, of course, for both our allies and here in the United States. But after World War II, we started to have some overproduction, so legislation was passed to buy extra product off the market. The PL 480 program was established, and it would buy extra product, which the federal government would buy extra dairy products off the market, store them, butter, powder, and cheese, and then we would sell them. Some we would sell to foreign countries that needed extra dairy products after the war, and that went on for years and years. So we have seen a very that program was quite helpful, and but it had to be funded. It was funded through the federal government. A lot of people believe that when I worked on the Hill and in dairy policy, a lot of people would say to me, "Oh, dairy farmers get checks from the federal government every month." They did not at all. The only assistance I got was through this program to buy extra products off the market to keep that to help keep the price better, since there was overproduction, and those products then were distributed to food banks here in the United States as well as overseas. So dairy farmers did not get any money from the federal government at all in terms of any milk checks until the MILC milk program was established by Senator Leahy in 2003 to give some financial help to dairy farmers when prices were low at that time. And it was a small amount of money, but it was very helpful. And Senator Leahy created that program, and he's been, he's retired now, of course, and but he's been very helpful. Of course, Senator Sanders and Senator Welch are extremely helpful as well. But I worked closely with Senator Leahy's office for years and years, and he's done a lot. And Senator Welch has sort of picked up the baton, and he works closely with Senator Sanders. So, that program was in place from 2003 to 2018, and now we have a program called the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, which is what they call a risk management program, and it's like an insurance program, and farmers can sign up for that. And Bill can tell you a little bit about that, but you sign up for that, and when the price drops to a certain margin level, and that's $9.50 per hundredweight, which is quite low. Farmers do get a payment, but it's mainly for smaller farmers. Farmers producing 5 million, actually they're pushing to get it pushed up to 6 million. That's equivalent to about a 300 cow, 250 to 300 cow dairy. But our dairy farms have grown over the years. I hate to have people call our larger farms factory farms, because 97% of our farms, including dairy operations in the United States, are family owned and family run. Now they have more help today because they're larger. We've got farms that are as large in the Northeast as 3,000 to 5,000 head, but they're run and owned by families, and they operate through many family members, but they have to hire help, and labor costs are high, and but they are operated by families and owned by families. So that's a misnomer when people call them factory farms, but they've had to get bigger, mainly because they've had to produce milk at a cost that they can afford to stay in business. And Bill can talk about the cost of production and what it takes to be able to make a living on the cost of production. Milk right now is in the $21. Milk, as I said, sells by the hundredweight. It's in the $21 range, and it's supposed to in 2025 this year will average $22 a hundredweight. That's not bad, but it's still on the sort of on the edge of being able to make a profit in order to not fall behind in your financial status in the dairy business. In 2022, milk sold for almost $25 a hundredweight, and for that time, the price was very good. But it's been down in the range of $18 a hundredweight, and that has been catastrophic for dairy farmers. We have 441 dairy producers in Vermont producing at 2.34 billion pounds of milk on an annual basis. As I said, we slipped a little. We were at 2.5 billion in Vermont. We produce more milk in Vermont, as I mentioned, than we can be used by our consumers. So we sell out of state. We produce very good milk. Our farms are very robust and have good production for cow. Our farmers are good managers, and we produce excellent amount of milk per cow. Bill was telling me a year ago, and I don't know what his production, but he was producing almost 100 pounds of milk per cow, which is very efficient and very effective. And that's what we've grown to. When I was growing up, if you were getting 40, 45 pounds per cow, you were doing pretty well. So you can see what happened. So
Bob, what could you tell us about,
please interrupt questions. Yes.
What could you tell us about the national production and maybe global production of dairy?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's good for us.
Yeah, national production is about 227 billion pounds of milk. We produce about the value is about $40 billion a year. The biggest producer of milk in the world is the EU. And I think their production is about 350 billion pounds, and they have been slipping though somewhat. They have curtailed some of their production, but the next ones are Argentina, New Zealand, and Australia. It drops down quite a bit when New Zealand produces 50 billion pounds of milk a year, although 95% of that is exported. And Australia produces, I think, around 70 or 80 billion pounds of milk, but they don't export as much. And I'm not sure exactly how much Argentina, but they're not in our range of 227 billion pounds. The EU produces the most, but that's collectively all of the countries in the EU. So we have maintained our production level. We've dropped a little bit, but we're coming back. We were down to 226, 225 billion, but we've remained in that 225 to 228 billion a year. Does that answer your question?
It does. Where would we most likely see our exports go to?
Oh, most of our exports go to Mexico as our best customer. We sell a lot to China, and we sell a lot, actually, but we compete with New Zealand. We sell a lot into Southeast Asia, into South Korea. We sold into Japan, but Mexico takes a lot of our product. They're our biggest customer, believe it or not. They don't have, really the growing conditions, the soils and the climate to produce a lot of milk, but they get a huge amount of milk.
I'm gonna take a moment. Well, so we got another question from Senator
Yeah, I'm
Collins.
sorry. I meant to say to jump in anytime and ask you questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Bob, I think it might also be helpful for especially the new members of the committee. How often is the FMMO order changed? And I'm guessing that it needs to stay above $20 a hundredweight in order for most farmers to at least be able to continue.
That's an excellent question. And matter of fact, it just changed. And it's there was a series of recommendations made to make certain changes to the federal milk marketing orders, which hasn't been done in years. And the dairy farmers, there's 11 federal orders across the country. Vermont is in federal order number 1 on the East Coast. It starts in Vermont. Maine has its own state order, but the federal order in Vermont, and it runs all the way down through New England and goes down into not all of New York, but a major portion of New York, Pennsylvania, down into New Jersey, and down into Delaware and Maryland. A federal order number 1. So there's 11 federal orders, and the federal order, the changes that were made, and I'll talk about the most important change. They had milk, and Bob Wellington, the late Bob Wellington from Agrimark, one of the best economists we had, and I worked with Bob a lot. He passed away a few years ago. But Bob devised a program, a formula back in 2002, in which the calculation for the Class 1 mover for calculating the FMO price was the higher of the Class 3 or the Class 4, the Class 3 being hard cheeses, the Class 4 being the butter and powder, and then there was a 74 cents differential, Class 1 differential added onto that, but it was the higher of those two. And that formula worked very, very well. But unfortunately, in 2018, during the Farm Bill debate, just before that, National Milk Producers Association, working with the processors, International Dairy Food Association, they came up with an agreement to change that. And the reason they did was that the processors were complaining that hedging didn't work well when you had a Class 1 price mover, the higher up, because the price kept fluctuating, so you couldn't, hedging was difficult to do. So they changed it to the average of Class 3 and Class 4 plus the 74 cents. And in doing so, they said this will work pretty well. It did not. It cost our dairy farmers a lot of money. At first, it was blamed on COVID because it went into effect, but it wasn't COVID. It was just the way that formula was calculated. And we lost, Bill, around $1.5 billion? Was it in that range in the Northeast, Bill?
Yeah. In total, we lost about 1.6 billion.
1.6 billion. And
bring Bill in a minute. Bill, do you want to join our discussion with us?
Sure.
Yeah, and I will just let me add this, and then I'll pass it right back to Bill. So what was done was, in this latest change in the federal milk marketing orders, which you asked about, which goes into effect in June, we will go back to the higher up. We made the argument that we needed to go back to the higher up. Now, if you think about it, wouldn't you think that when you're calculating the Class 1 price mover, that the higher up, Class 3 or Class 4, being would be the best way to calculate the Class 1 price mover is the best way to go? It would think common sense would tell you that. So we're going back to that, and that's going to help restore. I think the price will be much better since we're going back. That's one of the pieces of the changes and the recommendations that came out of this recent recommendations for the federal milk marketing order. Bill.
Okay, nice job, Bob. Good history. It's taken quite a lot to get us here, and it's taking quite a lot to stay here. It's a little hard to get pushy with the federal government, but if you don't speak up in a voice that they hear, you don't get anything. And even then, you may not get much. But I think that the federal order hearings, federal milk marketing order hearings that concluded late at the end of the year, 24, some good changes were made. And that was supposed to address a lot of the issues that we had. And like Bob said, we went from the average of, which was a poor deal for the farmer. It was touted to be revenue neutral. It certainly was not. Farmers lost $1.6 billion out of their milk checks that should have been there, that would have been if they hadn't changed the formula. And now we're headed in a better direction. I had attached some letters that I had written, and I assume that you folks on the committee have received those. Have a look at them. Those were written before the hearings and during the hearings, and you'll see my comments to the USDA Secretary of Ag and his AMS administrator, Ag Marketing Services Administrator under USDA, responded on his behalf. And I didn't much care for his response. So I sent a letter back to him, and I don't think he cared much for my response, but I think he needed to hear it, you know. I feel like some of these folks get in a position and they're the supervising authority. They don't have to listen. Well, guess what? We all have to pay attention and we all have to listen. So he got his due anyway. Let's see. My testimony, I sent the one letter as testimony for the federal order. And as part of that process, I underscored the importance of determining the true value of milk through discovery as it pertains to the integrity of those federal orders. There were high-level meetings convened for 2 years preceding those hearings. They involved National Milk Producers Federation, its member cooperatives, and others who collectively account for about 85% of the milk produced in this country, all in preparation for a long overdue federal hearing process. And that was convened the year before in 2023 and concluded in 2024. Like Bob said, there are 4 classes of milk. And how do we determine a price? Here's the deal. In order to accurately determine the market value of raw milk, you need to move one step away from raw milk and use the basic products made from it as a starting point. You then back into a milk value by adjusting for yields and conversion costs. In order to remain competitive, it is of significant importance to update the conversion formulas used to discover the true value of milk. Having achieved that value, we now have a base from which Class 1 values are determined. The Class 1 fluid market pricing is unique to that market, but the function of the federal order establishes a different value for Class 1 based on the competitive value of milk for manufacturing. See, it's a interdependent system. One can't function without the other. If you skew the price figure of one, you screw up the whole system. Now, basically what you have done, what they did by establishing that average of, instead of using the higher of Class 3 or a higher of Class 4, by using the average of plus 74 cents, what's that? 74 cents. That's a number they picked out of the air. That doesn't amount to much more than a bureaucracy blunder, and it costs the farmers dearly. So we got back on track, but the idea is if you can price the milk by its actual use those components as a base for the fluid milk. The fluid milk needs to stay higher, the higher priced milk, because if you get down to where you're pricing it, if you price the manufacturing milk, the class 3 or class 4 milk higher, it causes another problem. It causes a depooling problem. And in the upper Midwest, I'm going to pick on those guys a little. They got it coming. Those guys are in a class 3 region. Cheese is their big production. Ours was largely dependent on fluid, but it's diminished some now. But we were in a class 1 region. They were in a class 3 region. When we were getting $13.80 or 90 cents a hundredweight, they were getting $23.80 or 90 cents a hundredweight. And that disparity didn't go over too big. What happened? They depooled their milk and sold it back at a price $10 a hundredweight more than we were getting. See, and that's all as a result of that formula and a result of the government buying a large amount of cheese, and it put some farms out of business. I mean, you can't do those kind of things. If you look at the letter back to the AMS secretary, administrator, I agreed with him on some points, but it didn't make any sense at all of how it turned out. Why would you take a component out of an equation that had served us well and change it to something that wasn't proven or tried? It was touted as revenue neutral, but it certainly didn't prove to be. Cost $1.6 billion. So how do you maintain that? I'll tell you like this. In 1970, we had 648,000 dairy farms in this country. And today, we've got less than 24,000 remaining. Now, what do you suppose is going to happen when we get down to half that? Are they then going to say, no, we're not going to take that amount for our milk. If you want our milk, this is what you're going to pay. And we need to avoid that. We've got a good system now established, I think. We need to give it a chance to play out and see how it works and iron out the kinks if there are some. Hopefully there aren't. But give it a chance before we change anything. What happened? Are you still there?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm
We can hear you, Bill.
yeah, well, I'm gonna have to I lost the picture here.
Well,
That's okay, we can see you.
we can see you, Bill.
You could just imagine us.
Yeah, just imagine it. We look better when you can't see us.
We can see you, Bill, and hear you well.
Okay, well, that's good.
Well, we got left, gentlemen. What would you want us to know in the 5 minutes that, because we're learning a lot here. What would be important that you'd want us to know?
Well, I want you to know that we appreciate your willingness to look into doing something for us. But I also want you to know that right now, I would suggest that we leave it alone. Because if you change something that's in the process of trying to play itself out to see how it's working, you first have to understand how it is working before you can change it. So if we go in now, especially after these changes since the federal order hearing, we might be inviting disaster. The other thing I'd like you to know is this. In New York, they have a program where that if you're a farmer and you want to build a new building, or if you buy a herd of cows, or capital investments, that sort of thing, they'll give you up to $3 million per entity through a 20% payback on those items that you buy. Now, I know Vermont doesn't have that kind of money, and right now, I know that I'm sure that we don't have that kind of money. But entertain an idea of something along the line of capital investment and a rebate to the farmer. If you want to grow your dairy industry, let's look at it like this. Vermont produces 2/3 of the milk produced in New England. And people flock here because, hey, look, our tourism business is $4 billion a year. Why is that? And do you think it would remain that way without the farms? Don't lose your labor force to do all of these constructive things and provide the infrastructure and the jobs. I mean, you're talking over 6,000 Vermont jobs. There are too many things at stake to ignore it. And I know there are people in Vermont now that don't like agriculture, but I guarantee you they like to eat. And they need to understand something. They need to understand that before you criticize everything and focus on it, you've got to recognize the system still has to work. I understand the environment's important. I understand that we need nutrition, and I understand that we need energy. But they need to understand that the system has to work if you want to eat. If you don't want to eat, that'll solve all the problems. We won't need energy, we won't need food. The environment will take care of itself. So I'd like to see people put it in a little better perspective than we saw out of the Senate Ag Committee last year, which banned our treated seeds, and that has to change. I'm not sure how you folks are going to help us, but banning treated seeds makes an island out of Vermont. And we're too small of a state to be recognized to amount to anything as far as changing policy. So now we're an island that puts us at a real disadvantage. We need to go back to where we're able to use the treated seeds. And we have 3 years to do that. So we're going to be looking for your help on that. So between the money that you could maybe do something with for capital investments and maybe the treated seed and some other pieces of legislation, you could do something that would bolster us instead of beleaguer us. And that would be much appreciated.
Sure. Good.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to see you on screen. I miss seeing you in person, and it's always good to hear your voice. We are going to talk to the federal delegation a little later this morning, and I think we will suggest to them that they don't monkey around with the formula, the milk, federal milk order right now. It's just let it go, see how well it's working, and go from there. All too often, especially in this building, it seems that we do something and it's not working, and instead of looking at the fundamental pieces of it, we change it, and sometimes, unfortunately, make it even worse. So, yeah, I think that's good advice, is to let things go the way they are right now. In terms of the milk or marketing order, and I will say not everybody in this room was 100% in favor of that, the neonic ban, so we'll just let it go at that. But as you say, we got 3 years.
So would you like me to send this? This is a one-page paper that I put together on that pricing formula. Sure. Would you like me to send that to Linda to distribute to you folks?
That'd be nice, Bill.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Well, we're up against our time. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming forward. If there's ever a time where you need to get back in to see us or have information with us, you know how to do that. We'd welcome you anytime. What we learned today was the history of with a brand new committee is very helpful, and And again, the words of, don't monkey around with what we have, because as of right now, we're on a path to where we could see where it might be beneficial to farmers is very helpful advice. So, we want to thank you, gentlemen, and we hope to see you again.
Well,
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you
very
for
much.
having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bob.
Thank you, committee. We're going to move on now to some young farmers. Looking forward to this discussion. Do we have everyone on?
No.
Okay. We have, looks like we have Stephanie Pope.
Hello, thank you for allowing us to be here today. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Perfect. My name is Stephanie Pope, and I'm an owner-operator of Iroquois Acres. We are an MFO right on the lake shores of Lake Champlain in Addison County. We farm about 2,500 acres. We have 10 non-farm employees, and we have 4 full-time farm or family employees. We are a 4-generation working farm. My grandfather bought the farm in 1956, and my husband Seth and my parents are working on a succession plan to take the farm forward. And my niece Ashlyn, who graduated from the 2+2 program, so thank you for that. She is the 4th generation, and I dare say our 2 boys will join her in the future. On our farm, we're not a huge farm, so we don't have a lot of technology, but we do cover crops. We inject manure, do all the reduced till, no-till planting. We have nutrient management plan and forest management plan that we all follow. Today, I'd like to talk to you. Bill touched on it a little bit, so he stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'd like to talk about business and economic development. And I'm going to share a little bit with what our neighboring states are doing to incentivize dairies to stay open. In Maine, they have a milk stabilization program, and it's a separate payment altogether from the milk check and the milk price. And the trigger takes into account operating costs, hired labor, opportunity costs of unpaid labor. And the stabilization program has prevented a greater loss of Maine dairy farms. Studies have reaffirmed that Maine loses dairies at a slower rate than other states in the Northeast region. It not only prevents farms to exit, but allows them to remain in business longer and quite possibly makes it more attractive for another generation. In Massachusetts, they have a farmer tax credit intended to offset downturns in milk price. It is paid 1 time per year, and it's around $3 per hundredweight in form of a tax credit. Bill touched on the New York program that they have for the capital reinvestment program. And 2025 will be its 3rd year that they are doing it. Not only does it help dairy farmers, but they are attracting processing facilities, and Central New York is becoming a place to market milk, hence allowing dairies to reinvest and grow. And I think if you take the emotion out of farming and why we do it, I really wonder if if we would do what we do. If you didn't talk about raising our kids on the farm and the way of life, I dare say a lot of people might not do what we do.
Could
Sorry.
you please turn your video back on? I
Yep.
accidentally turned it off. And Bob, could you turn your video off, please? Thank you.
Stephanie, as far as Massachusetts, $3 per hundred,
Yeah.
When that kicks in, how is that money? Do you know how that money is raised? Is that monies that are put in from the General Assembly, or is there
I believe so. I believe it's a statute they have, but I don't quote me. I just did a little research and see what everybody else is doing to see, what other states in our area are doing. So I don't want to answer you incorrectly, but I believe it's part of their statute.
Mm-hmm.
We need, and I challenge you to reverse the trend of shrinking dairy farm numbers and cow numbers in the state of Vermont. I don't have the answers, but I feel things such as the right to farm bill would help. There hasn't been an updated version in many years, making us very vulnerable as an industry. I ask you to please look at passing the one that has been presented to you, I think, in the last couple of days. I also ask you, when faced with bills that have such a huge impact on dairy farms, that we follow the science. We follow the science every day, and we ask you to do the same. For example, and Bill touched base on the neonics, so I won't get into the weeds, no pun intended. It has such a huge impact on us, and we are trying to keep up with technology and doing what's best for the water quality, and I think that we have to take all of that into account. So I won't be too much longer, but I do want to leave you with this. Fun fact for the day is, and this is a few years old, but it's still relevant. Each dairy cow pumps $13,000 into the local economy. I'm not very great at quick math, but seeing some of the names up here on the screen, represented in this room with today with the farmers, you're looking at around $100 million into local economy with what we do every day. So my advice is keep the cows and keep the farms. I thank you for your time today and your service every day while you're up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, how many milk cows do you have?
So we are an MFO and we milk about 600. So we're pretty little probably compared to everybody else today.
Well, it's a big farm where I come from. Yep. Well, thank you. Committee, any questions for Stephanie? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm curious about Maine.
Yeah.
We did have some talk last year and probably the year before about that. Does Maine just add $1 or some figure to the federal milk price, which would mean it's more expensive for consumers in Maine, but the gap there, the difference would go back to the farmer?
So it's part of the statute. I did a little more research on theirs, and it's a separate payment altogether. So it doesn't go on the milk. I think it's just like a stopgap, but it doesn't go against the product, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. We can look it up here too.
Yep.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Stephanie, and feel free to jump in on any time. Who else do we have up there?
Bradley is here.
We have Bradley St. Pierre. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just getting a video working or trying to.
Yeah.
It's gonna work, but I'm gonna try. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Yep.
Okay. I'm not too tech savvy, so I might just do the sound.
Well, Bradley, the floor is yours.
All right. I appreciate it. So yeah, my name is Bradley St. Pierre. I live in Berkshire, Vermont, and I work on my family's dairy farm. Just like Stephanie, I'm a 4th generation farmer. My kids are going to be 5th, hopefully. I have a wife and 3 kids. My kids are 6, 3, and a year and a half. And I hope that one or all of them take interest in what we're doing. And I know probably a lot of you guys are parents, so your perspective on life changes once you start having kids. And I spend a lot of my days thinking about if my kids are going to want to do it and how do I get them involved, but not work them too hard so they want to do it someday. I don't want to burn them out by 15 and they never want to work on the farm again. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about that. So my great-grandfather, Ever St. Pierre, migrated from Canada in the 50s, and he brought his 11 kids, one being my grandfather, to Sheldon, Vermont. He bought a farm there, and he came to America for better economic opportunity. And then when my grandfather was old enough, he left, married my grandmother, bought his father-in-law's farm in Richford, Vermont, and he farmed there. He sold his cows in 2006. And we still are lucky enough to be able to crop both of my great-grandfather's farm and my grandfather's. My father started on his own in 1986, buying and selling cows, and then now me and my brother Jamie are trying to transition the farm over from both my mother and my father here in Berkshire at our home site. A little bit about myself is I graduated Richford High School in 2015. In 2015, I joined the Vermont Army National Guard. I served for 5 years. During my time in the Guard, I went to college for diesel mechanics in SUNY Cobleskill, about 4.5 hours away, where I was lucky enough to get an associate's degree and meet my wife. So it was kind of a 2-for-1 deal. And asked her to come back to Vermont with me, and has given me 3 beautiful kids, and we live right here in the little town of Berkshire. And so I've been full-time on the farm for a long time, since I was about 10. I'm 27 now, but officially full-time since 2018 to 2015, or 2018 to 2025, excuse me. And me and my brother, during those 7 years, have been transitioning the farm a little bit, what I'm going to talk about you today. First of all, if the farm wasn't successful or viable, it wouldn't have given me and Jamie a place to come back from. You know, you talk about the milk check, you know, not only paying all of the help, but feeding our families, right? So we were lucky enough that the farm was in a good enough spot through my mother and my father's success to be a viable option for me and Jamie to come home and raise our families, you know? So very lucky for that. And we don't try to, we try to give that the praise it deserves, because unfortunately there's a lot of people that maybe would have come home to the family farm, but it wasn't going to be a viable option for them. So we feel really lucky, and we hope to give that option to our children someday. We have some retired farmers that help us, and sometimes it works out where they want to slow down on farming, and they sometimes sell us their cows or sell someone the cows and rent their land to us or our neighbors. And I kind of look at that as we're providing kind of, it's not really a Roth IRA, I guess, but it is some sort of retirement for a man or woman that were retired all their lives, you know, and are using that to slow down. And lucky enough to work with a lot of those retired dairymen and their wealth of knowledge. And I love hearing the stories from them. And it's a really good thing for our community to offer somebody something like that and still keep them local, and still keep them active and working. One of my biggest concerns going forward, so first of all, I'm not a great public speaker. When I wanted to be a farmer, and what's that?
You're doing great.
Okay.
I can't tell, you're doing very well.
But as I get older, more involved in the farm and transition, right? My mom has been doing this for a lot of years and kind of is the unsung hero of our farm, because she's been trying to represent not us, but our neighbors and all the members of the dairy community in Vermont. That if I want to farm, this is part of the gig, right? I need to do these things and encourage my neighbors and young farmers like myself to do these things. It's not my first choice, but I realize it's part of the deal I'm making. It's my responsibility as Vermont dairy farmer. With that being said, my biggest fear, obviously the milk price, finding help, you know, making sure you're paying your loans are huge, you know, stressful, responsible things you need to do as a dairy farmer. But personally, my biggest fear for me, my brother, and our children is Vermont's regulation. Mr. Rowell talked about putting us on an island, okay? And I look at our regulation. I have a lot of friends in New York and the Midwest that farm, and just the amount of regulation that we deal with compared to some of our neighbors and my friends throughout the US is just so different. I don't want to say extreme, but for some specifics, I would call it extreme. And I know that I need to speak up and talk, and our neighbors need to talk. And I just hope going forward, we can look at that harder and, you know, have more of a communication back and forth. It seems like a lot of times when regulations are being made, when it's printed or enforced, it's like, who did they talk to before they thought of that, you know, because that doesn't seem very sensible to me, you know. And, you know, as we transition the business, I'm in budget meetings and partnership meetings and talking to the bank. Our bank, you know, we're making money and paying our loans. they're not really looking at, oh, you're going to lose 10% of your acres due to this new regulation, or you got to invest X amount of dollars into this because of regulation. So it just puts you in a tough spot, because on one hand, if you want to continue farming in Vermont, you need to follow regulations, obviously. And on the other hand, you need to make sure your bills are getting paid to your banker, you know? And I just find
Bradley?
that, yes, sir.
Bradley, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yep.
Bradley, it would be incredibly helpful. I'm new on the, this is Senator Major. I'm new on the Agriculture Committee. If you could outline what regulations are inhibiting you from doing the good work, and then at some later date, we could probably follow up with it. It's imperative for me to be educated on this and to learn what is stopping you from doing your best work.
Yeah. So I don't know all the technical numbers of like per regulation, but I'll talk generally about some things that can be challenging. I think that we have strict manure spreading rules, I'll say, and I think that they're coming from a good place. And I think that no farmer that's still farming in the state of Vermont wants to blatantly put manure where they don't want it. We want to put it on our fields to help grow crops, okay? And I realize regulations are trying to help guide us, right? But sometimes because of the regulations, they're forcing farmers to spread. Because it's regulated, I have to spread here because I can't spread past this date, or I can't start before April 15th or whatever the deadline is. They're forcing them to push the boundaries because, you know, it's on a date. I wish they would rather say, you know, if the soil can accept the manure, it doesn't matter when you spread. You know what I mean? If the weather and the soils will allow, without runoff or any contamination, spread. But now we're forced between April 15th and December 15th, let's say, I think those are the general dates. We have to get as much manure done in that time period. And it really puts the axe on a lot of farmers, because there's X amount of months of the year you can't do anything.
Are you doing direct injection?
Yep. So something that's changed on our farm, and I'm glad you asked, is we're doing, I would say 60 to 70% of our manure through a drag line, pumping it. And that's good for two reasons. One of the reasons, we're pumping up to 4 miles away from manure storage. So that's an incredible amount of less trucks on the road for our neighbors and our roadways and everything out, less fuel, right? Now, other thing why that's good is because, so if we pump 70% of our manure, I would say probably 70% of all the manure we pump is getting injected right into the soil, whether it's on grass or corn. And I think that's a win for us. We talked about earlier getting our nutrients where we want them and having less risk. I think that's a great tool. We use it just as much as we can. And that's been a huge thing that's happened over the last 7 years that I've been on the farm home time, and it's happening throughout our state with a whole bunch of our neighbors and counterparts, because everybody's seeing the benefit of getting manure further away and without trucks and getting it in the soil.
Got one question for you, Bradley.
Yep.
Bradley, Senator Heffernan from Addison County.
Howdy.
Hi. Do you know if the other states, as far as spreading, did they do it as when the soil will accept, or do they even have the laws?
Yeah, so like we'll just go across the lake, right? Which is kind of silly for me, because a farmer in Alberg, you cross that bridge into Rouse's Point, right? Two totally different types of regulation and rules, right? And they're both, you know, within a couple miles from each other. They can spread all year. I know that for fact. I guess I don't know the specifics. I know they can spread on snow cover, I believe, but I don't know how much snow and all that, to be honest.
All right.
What else? I know you mentioned the neonic seed and, you know, the restrictions and the fears of that. anything else that would come to mind, Bradley, that would, cause you to lay awake at night and try to figure out how you're gonna be successful?
Yep. So a little bit before my time, they started doing grass buffer strips on cornfields. Okay. And the theory, I think, is to prevent nutrient runoff and maybe some erosion theories. And if you want to farm in the state, you got to follow the rules, right? So us and a whole bunch of our neighbors have continued to put grass buffer strips along cornfields on waterways or ditches. The problem I have with it is it's not only on the lower side of the field you have to do it, you are regulated to do it on the uphill side of the field. So depending if the grade is steep and the water, there's no amount of water manure that could run that way to that ditch, you're still required to do a grass buffer. That's just a small example of let's be practical and sensible, right? Because so you're giving up those acres to help runoff, but it's on the uphill side where there's nothing that can run off. It's not even downhill of the cornfield. You know what I mean? That's a snippet of it. That is frustrating sometimes. Since my brother have been home, one of our new responsibilities is we deal with our yearly inspection. We're an LFO farm, so we get inspected every year, and per LFO that we have, we get inspected. And that requires walking manure pits, walking some fields, walking the operating site. And to be frank, my mother and father, it was a very tough day as a child seeing them go through that. And I kind of thought my mother and father were exaggerating. And then me and my brother came home from college, and it was our new task and responsibility to do. And I can say without a doubt, it's the top 5 worst day of my year. Every year, the last 7 years that we've taken it. The amount of stress that it causes. And I do think there's a place for it. Like, we need to be held accountable, but you just spend that whole day. And I feel like we're not using common sense or practicality. And I just really wish that we could do a little bit back and forth, because I think when there's buy-in both from the state and the Vermonter, we can reach better goals, and we can get to a better place in the state together. But I feel like a lot of it is one-sided as they create regulations, and create ideas.
Yep. Well, Bradley, we're gonna bring in some more people. Please stay on, because we're gonna have some more discussion. So who else do we have?
Keith is not yet online, so Kylie Chittenden.
Kylie Chittenden, how are you?
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, we can see you.
Good morning. I'm really excited to be with you today. I'm Kylie Chittenden. We farm in Addison County. It's my husband and I. My parents are retired from the farm. My mom is still working, but not for the farm. On the dairy, we have my brother as well. He works for us. My husband and I are in our mid-40s, and we have 3 children on the farm. My oldest is 13, and then the next is 11, and then my youngest is 8. And we spend a lot of time in the summer doing 4-H and showing cows. And my dairy is unique in that we have a 4-H club, and we are constantly thinking of different ways that we can recruit labor and give kids in our community an experience in agriculture. So we also work with the Hannaford Career Center and give kids an experience like in our diesel shop with my brother. My background is, obviously, I grew up on the farm here. My husband grew up on a smaller farm in New York. His farm was 100 cows, and he decided to move to Vermont to be with my family. I guess what I'm going to talk to you about, we're an LFO, so we're a large farm. And there's been a lot of topics before me, so I'm going to pull on some of those and then share some other things that I think are important. In my area, we have big open fields, but our cell phone service is really poor. And I see a lot of times where that impacts my business because my most people that know me will say, hey, your cell phone mailbox is full. And that's because when I'm at the dairy, it fills up. Then when I drive away, all the messages come in. And that's limiting because communication is so important. In addition to that, when there's emergencies, my employees don't, it could be dangerous where there's times that they can't call out. So, and it also limits our access to technology. We can't use cameras, say, that depend on broadband. So I think that's really important for our industry. We've got to have better access to cell phone service and broadband. I guess the other thing I wanted to touch on is the right to farm bill. As we all know, there's like a pretty significant housing crisis in our state. And I think the state's looking for ways to address this, ways that are outside of the box or potentially changes that we haven't experienced before. And as stewards of the ag landscape, for us as dairy producers, that means we might be getting some new neighbors. And while we welcome new neighbors also bring complications to our dairies. Sometimes they're really a positive fit. A right to farm bill would be really great because as we think about the generations coming back into our business, we want opportunity for this next generation, and we can't really be held with frivolous lawsuits. We do the best we can to be a good neighbor, but there are times where our tractors are operating later at night when we're trying to beat a storm. Or like Bradley mentioned, when we're getting close to that manure spreading deadline, we have to go when the weather's right. So that's just one example where a right to farm bill would give us the ability to do what we need to do to keep this open landscape. Yes.
Another question.
Kelly, if I can interject right here, just there is a bill right now that we have that I've co-sponsored that is on frivolous lawsuits. So we absolutely, and I want you to continue, but we absolutely understand it. For me, learning what you have to go through is on some of these lawsuits is not good. And we want to make sure that you can do your business. So I think it's important, and I would like to reach out to you at some point to get your opinion on some of these things as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yep. Well, I really appreciate that you're focused on that because it's certainly something on the back of our mind. I wanted to touch on maybe another side of education on manure. We used to think of manure as something that we had to get rid of. Now we're looking at it and using manure in different ways as more of an offset for fertilizer. And when we're injecting manure, we're bringing our fertilizer rates way down. That's a win-win for our community, and also, you know, for our farms. It's less imports of nutrients into the state. That's a really positive thing that farmers are doing that we're not talking about a lot. Something we've done that's unique on my farm is we've spread on a growing crop of corn. So we use the phrase like V5, which means there's 5 leaves. So corn that's, you know, like say this high is still flexible. And we've put manure right on top in place of nitrogen. And the first time you see it, if you're a farmer and you've invested in that crop, it kind of makes your stomach turn like, boy, is this, all my corn is now brown. Is that going to stand up? And it lays down a little bit, but it's still flexible. And we've had really, really phenomenal luck with that. We have heavy clay here, so we can't always do it. But when the time presents, where the season is right and the dirt isn't too wet, that's been a really unique and cool thing that we're doing with a nutrient that sometimes is viewed as a negative I guess, yeah. So I guess I just want to share that we're looking at ways to take resources we have on farm and use them differently.
How many milkers do you have?
Excuse me?
How many milk cows do you have?
900.
900, okay, thank you.
Yep. I'm trying to think of, I was given some fairly specific points to discuss today. I guess the other thing that I think is worth noting, maybe you already know this, but tourism, I think, is right around 4 billion. And I just heard in the State House last week that dairy also brings 4 billion to the economy. That gives us a really cool position because tourism, a lot of people come to Vermont because of our open landscape or in our working landscape. So I think that's really important when we think about new bills and things like and how we value farms in our state. We're important. And I think we have to get better, at least as farmers, about talking about that and what we do bring. But I guess that's more or less what I wanted to share with you for messages today. And I really appreciate all the efforts that you guys do working for us and on our behalf and utilizing us as a resource when there's questions about tough bills or how they'll impact us.
How many acres are you farming?
We're 3,500 acres.
3,500, yeah. And,
Yep.
and remind us again where you're at?
We're in Addison County, just south of Middlebury and Shoreham.
Yep, sure. Okay, yep.
One more thing. One of the things that I've heard throughout testimonies is the recruitment of young people going into farming. And it seems like you have a process that you are instituting, whether it's 4-H and bringing. I don't know if you're connecting across the state and other entities that are bringing young people or have any programs that are bringing young people into farming.
I guess I can't say that I've connected across the state, but I went to school at Cornell, graduated in 2003, and I have worked really hard to try and funnel kids through the ag program there. And I feel like it's a win when I have a kid from my 4-H club, for example, that with a non-farm background, and they go through my 4-H program and then end up at Cornell studying ag. And then the ultimate is when they come back to our state. And I have a handful of examples of kids that have done that. And now they're the boss at some pretty sizable companies that are within our state. So for me, that's a major incentive. I always hope I catch one that might want to have some interest in my own business, but that, I guess, I feel success when I have a non-farm kid that stays in our business, in our industry.
Are you a first generation farmer?
I'm second.
Second. And
Yeah.
where you're at right now, the farm that you have right now, is that any family relation or is just where you guys have started out?
Yeah, it was my parents' dairy.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2008, I was single and I bought 1,000 acres next door to my parents' dairy. And then I met my husband, and I do think back, like, it's kind of a funny time. The bank gave me the money to buy 1,000 acres on my own. And then my husband, I wonder what he thinks every once in a while, like, what's this girl with 1,000 acres in Vermont and her dad isn't a part of it? Like, anyways, that's my story though. So then together we bought the next farm. And so our farms housed the heifers until my dad got sick in 2017. And then we had some tough decisions to make. Wasn't the romantic Hallmark movie, like, pass the farm down. We went to our lender and we said, hey, my dad's not going to make it. He's a sole prop. That's what the doctors told us anyways. What can we do? And he said, well, I can lend you money, but you're not going to be able to buy everything. So at that time, I sold my dad's heifers on his behalf to an export market, and they went offshore to Turkey, and we bought his milk cows. And my dad, like, as the story goes, he made it. He didn't die, but he was never the same after. He's not, anyways, has a heart condition. So he couldn't return to farming. And then over time, we've transitioned his business into ours.
Nice. Yes.
So I don't know if Bradley's still on, but I did look up and the manure dates that were mentioned earlier. I think it's actually December 15th to April 1st are the periods where you can't. And it's part of the RAPs, so it's administered by the Agency of Agriculture. And I at least will be willing to talk to Steve Guinell or whoever else we have in from the Agency of Ag my guess is that they were put in, through rulemaking and not statute. The problem, as I see it, with ever putting a number into something is things change all the time. So if you say, well, the minimum wage should be X, the market sort of takes care of itself at some point about that. And I think the same could be said about this. And to me, if you don't think the farmers are capable of figuring it out themselves, you know, shame on you, I guess.
Well, and I think the question that I would ask the committee and ask anybody that has a little bit more knowledge about it, is when they were doing that, were they figuring that they were injecting, or were they just top dressing? And I think that would go a long way for us as a committee to investigate that, because, you know, we're talking to 3 farmers right already, and they're all injecting. And I think that does make a big difference as far as how runoff happens.
And I think also, I mean, the climate's changing, so, you know, you can spend a lot of time figuring out why, but we're just talking about the fact that it's warmer earlier than it's ever been, and probably warmer later. So I think we should leave it up to the farmers to figure out when's a good time to start spreading, and, that's all.
And there's another thing that we've already, and I'd heard it before, but we took testimony earlier in the week or last week where, you know, there's a lot more moisture. The manure pits were filling up more. You had more to get rid of, and you still had the short windows. And yes, I do know that you can apply for a permit to extend those dates out. But I think it would be very interesting for this committee to look at those dates and to bring in more testimony to find out as far as if those dates could be extended.
Yeah, I think that.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that given the chance, Mr. Alice had 241 farms left in Vermont, or something like that.
441.
441. I think that everybody that's left wants to do a good job, from the smallest farm to the biggest farm. And I think that given the opportunity, I think nobody wants to end up in the paper, and everybody wants to do a good job for their farm, their community, their family. And I think that.
Kylie, do you inject as well?
Yes, we do. And we also work really closely with a nutrient management planner who works with farms in Connecticut, New York, and Vermont, Massachusetts. So other states view or give more flexibility to their nutrient management planner to help make those decisions for the farm to prevent runoff. That's another asset that we already hire on farm to make good, smart choices. I think we could look at that a little bit better in Vermont, how we're utilizing our nutrient management planners, and what, this may not be the right word, but authority, I guess I'd say authority, prevention for runoff, where we can utilize them better versus a date that's not coordinated to science.
So we've got a couple more people we'd like to get on, either Brittany or Keith. Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Yep.
So my name's Keith Landfair. We farm in Hyde Park, Vermont. I'm actually sitting in my work truck because I totally lost track of time. We farm right around 1,200 acres. That's the most that we've ever farmed in our lives. We've had quite a few dairies around me that have gone out, so we started renting their land. We haven't bought any of it yet. We milk right around 400 cows and growing. We just barely switched from 2X to 3X milking. The interesting part about our farm is that my brother and I, we don't own the farm. My mother is sole owner right now. My father passed away back in 2022 with multiple sclerosis. So I came back from college in 22, graduated from SUNY Cobleskill. My brother's been back. He tried a semester at VTC, realized that wasn't for him, so he came back full time to the farm. I'm only 24, and my brother, I believe, is 26. So we're just young pups.
Yep. So,
Um,
what would you want to tell us, Keith? That, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
So for at least the topic that we want to talk about is implementing different practices going forward to the next 10 years that you probably wouldn't have done even 5 years ago. For us, would probably be harvesting our cover crops. We have very, very great corn ground around here, but only when it's not flooding, like it has the last 2 years. Um, Harvesting our cover crops as a forage crop in the spring, along with like first cut, we can we like how we can have a we can do a better job of putting up forages. Some of our ground, we roughly, I mean, we have right around 1,200 acres, but we have right around 500 on the river, so it's kind of tough to. We have good corn ground, but we don't have the best grass ground, and the grass ground is poorly drained. It's not clay; it's just heavy, very bony too. So that's around the farm. It doesn't really grow the best corn. So we feel like we can try to utilize our good a good haylage or wheatlage, rylage, triticale crop down on the river when it doesn't flood, and we could still capitalize on our no-till. That's what we've been implementing that for the last 10 years so far. But our other biggest concern, not concern, but we're the last 3 years we've been injecting manure. That's a practice we plan on going forward on all of our corn ground. We've implemented it on some grass ground here and there, but for at least on grass, from what we've noticed, it works on a drier year. If it's a really wet year, you just drown out your grass. That's, I guess, kind of the overview of what we've done, or at least like next year, we're going to start harvesting our cover crops too, as well. Just being more efficient on the acres that we run. I mean, like I said, we picked up a lot of ground in the last 2 years, but at the same time, we want to try to be the most efficient on what we can run. We chopped right around 800 acres of corn this year just due to inventory loss, and we're growing, and we do right around like 450 acres of grass. Cold season grasses mainly.
Is it just you and your brother as far as laborers, or you have others?
We got four. Well, we got four Hispanics milking the cows. I'm the feeder guy. We got one other guy that helps us out too. That him and I switch on and off with feeding. Total on payroll during the wintertime, we have 7 employees. Yeah, seven employees. During the summertime, we try to keep 2 more for outside people, due to the fact that we do a lot of extra trucking on the side as well. And that will be in the next 10 years. Another practice that we implement is more trucks, even though they can be a headache at times. But
how do you see the 3X working for you, 3 times a day of milking?
so far, so good. I mean, we're still in the raw stages of it. We only started 5 days ago, but we're also up right around like 4 pounds a cow. So it's in the positive right now. We haven't seen a negative yet, but our biggest negative from switching from 2X to 3, well, it's the biggest positive, I guess. We were having a lot of cows leak in the stalls. So we were having a lot of E. coli issues, a lot of mastitis. Became that we would have a great cell count. We average right below 110, 100,000 normally, but it would be 2 to 3 cows a week we'd have to treat. So we could manage it pretty good, but it was a lot of E. coli issues leading back to leaking in the beds. Now we're not really seeing that now. We were the first couple days because we went from a schedule of 1-to-1 milking to 1, 9, and 5 now. So the cows were still leaking in the first 3 days because they couldn't figure out when they wanted to release their oxytocin or not, or when was a good time to release it. That was kind of a pain, but so far so good. I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can be more efficient as far as cost per stall. See if we can try to bump that or mitigate that a little bit more.
What else do you have for technology as far as, is it pen and paper or are you just, you know, what are you using for technology?
So as far as on the nutrient management side, we use GoCrop. We work pretty heavily with Jeff Sanders, through UVM. He does all of our MFO permitting. We're going to be applying for an LFO this year. Um, as far as data logging, for through the dragline, we get a report at the end of the year from the dragline company through the system that we run on our planner too, at being Ag Leader. Um, we're on. We only have one tractor set up right now for GPS, which is that's a blessing in disguise. Um, that was all. We planted everything no-till. We do all of our mowing through GPS. Or sorry, we do all of our planting through GPS. We do all of our mowing, fertilizer applications. That's where I think it excels the best too, where we're not overlapping. We're actually noticing that we're saving a lot on fertilizer because we're not over applying on our straight rows, on our outside boundaries. Um, we're slowly implementing into the more on the data in the tractors where we can harvest more data. We actually just barely got a harvest lab on our new chopper too this year, so that was pretty cool. We don't have the capacity to store the data yet, but that will be probably at the end of the year. We're gonna use that as far as like nutrient recommendations, where on our when we harvest, we can see where we can put manure, where manure doesn't excel, um, especially on fertilizer too, pretty much like variable rating everything. And I know that there's Scott Magnan, he's been doing a lot of test trials with some smaller farms. Don't quote me, that maybe some larger farms too, but uh, as far as variable rating their manure and fertilizer as well.
Yep.
It's a lot of high tech.
Yeah. Well, what else? We're gonna move to Brittany. Anything else you want to add to us, Keith?
Like Kylie said, I'm sorry for slowly being late to joining, but I got the last end of what she was saying. Just pretty much thank you for advocating for us. I mean, like Bradley said, there's not too many farms left in this state, and seems to be that dairying in Vermont it's a lifestyle. It's everything that we want to do, but it's just becoming harder and harder to be able to not have as many people speak on behalf of it. And as far as like my father always told me when I was younger, I mean, he didn't do any of the DFA meetings. He didn't talk to any. I mean, he did what he did. He did what he could to feel like he could get his word out there, but he didn't take the time as much as, I'm not saying I take a lot of time as much as I should, but I've never. This is only my second time speaking to you guys, so it's nice to being able to share my word, share my brothers and my story and my mother's as well. So appreciate you guys listening to us.
Well, I think I don't know that we could really say that there was a lot of good that came out of the pandemic, but Zoom was a great thing that came out of the pandemic, because otherwise we probably wouldn't be seeing you folks today and hearing what you had to say. So
absolutely.
We're gonna move on. Oh, go ahead.
Now, I have to say, just because my father was a dairy farmer and he got out in '86. But like you said, he just minded his own business. But he was semi-involved with like Agrimark and that. But you're realizing to stay relevant, you need to be involved and have your voice heard. And I hope more of you young people do the same thing, because that's what's going to keep you guys alive, is being relevant and being heard. Where the older farmers were like,
right.
I'm just going to milk my cows, do my land, and you know. But so thank you.
Well,
That's not the way to be. It's not really the way to being successful. I'm not saying it's not the way to being successful, but people need to know your story. I'm not saying that people have to go out and buy milk and whatnot, but they need to know what you're doing at the end of the day.
Yep. Well, stay on for a minute. We're going to bring on Brittany now. Brittany, are you there?
She's by phone.
Yeah,
And then where she is in the Haven.
yeah.
Depends on
Brittany?
cell service.
Oh, Fort Hills, yeah.
Yeah.
Bristol, right?
Bristol, New Haven, Weybridge.
Brittany, you need to unmute.
There you go.
You're coming.
Yeah, I think I'm good now.
Okay, we got you. Brittany, welcome. Just tell us who you are.
Hi. Sorry I can't be on video today, but here I am. My name is Brittany Sear. I'm a third generation dairy farmer here in Bristol, Vermont. I farm with my father, his 3 siblings, my brother, and my 3 cousins. So there's 9 of us here. All together, we're milking 2,300 cows and farming 6,300 acres. We are an LFO. In addition to doing corn silage and grass haylage, we also do some soybeans that we roast and grind and feed to our cows on the farm, as additional acres have become available to us, and we've decided that that's the best way to utilize them. We currently employ 45 full-time employees in Addison County, and I graduated high school in 2014, and I went on to Cobleskill. And after 2 years of being there, I decided to transfer on to Cornell University, where I graduated with a degree in animal science in 2018. Upon my graduation, I decided that I wanted to return to the dairy. A lot of that was that I felt like the dairy was a great opportunity for me. My father and his siblings had grown the business to a large enough level that we could all have a comfortable lifestyle and income. Previous to me graduating, we'd invested in a methane digester, and because of our scale was part of the reason that we were able to do that. And with that, we're able to get bedding from that, and all the cows in the barns, instead of using sand or sawdust, we bed them with dried manure solids. So then I'm 28 years old. My cousins and my brother, we range in age from 20 to 28. And as we've gotten a new influx of labor, we've had the opportunity to invest in many different technologies to kind of drive our farm forward. Some of the things we've invested in the last 10 years include a manure drag line. One of the biggest advantages to this is we're able to pump manure from our dairy facility to satellite pits and reduce the number of tractors and trailers on the road throughout the year. Another thing we invested in was a crop sprayer. This allows us to have more control about the timing and application of fertilizers and insecticides on our crops, and so that we have more flexibility on if we need to wait another day for the field to dry out, we can wait because we know what we have to cover, whereas previously when we were relying on custom applicators, they were under more pressure to follow a more stringent timeline. So that has allowed us to be more precise about our management of that. Along with that, we also have a chopper with nutrient reading technology. So as it goes through the field, it's recording in real time, on this acre, this is how much crop we harvested. This was the nutrient value of that. And then from that, we can use that information to go to variable rate spreading of manure when we get to that point. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're still figuring that out. And then the other thing that we have invested in on the cow side for technology is we've put in the activity monitoring for the cows, which is essentially giving all the cows a Fitbit, so it monitors when they're eating, when they're resting, if they're coming in heat, if they're sick and need to be looked at. And this has been a real game changer because we feel like we find cows that are sick faster, and we also are able to reallocate labor towards doing different jobs than just, eyes on the cows, trying to figure out which ones are sick, which ones need other attention, etc. We also put a new parlor in 2017, and in that parlor, we have a milk weight for every cow, every milking, and a milk temperature reading for every cow, for every milking. So that also helps us with health monitoring of the lactating herd. So with all that technology, when it's all working and the internet's working, it's great. It saves us a lot of time so that we're able to focus on other tasks.
Brittany, tell us about the challenges of coming back to the family farm after being at Cornell and trying to teach folks that have been farming for a while. Were there any discussions about that?
Can you repeat the end of that? Were there any discussions about what?
About when you coming back from Cornell with new technologies and new ideas. Was it hard to bring those ideas into an existing farm?
No, I think the older generation in our situation was very receptive, and we were also in an economic position that we were able to invest in these technologies. A lot of farms want to invest in them, and one of the restricting factors is capital and access to capital.
Yep.
Hi, Brittany, Steve Heffernan. Fitbits for the cows, roughly what is that? How expensive are those? Are they pretty reasonable, or because you milk what would you say 23 head or?
Yeah, we're on a monthly subscription plan, and it's $2 a cow a month, so it's about $4,600 a month.
Yeah,
but it's a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, it essentially is, 3/4 of a laborer is what is how we envision the cost, and we feel like we're gaining that back in labor efficiency.
You lose one
because
cow.
we're able.
You lose a cow and a half a month, and something if you could get there quicker, as you said, you're able to monitor health a lot better. That would make the difference.
Yes.
And has it made the difference? Have you caught more cows that might get sick and die?
We feel we catch them much quicker, which also helps them recover faster. Or make a decision to cull them faster,
What else would you like to tell us, Brittany?
I mean, I think everybody covered everything pretty well. The right to farm is definitely also important. I think that's one thing that, coming back to the dairy in Vermont, I didn't realize that was going to be as much of an issue as it has been, and pushback from our neighbors. And I think some of that pushback, honestly, is just lack of education of the general public about how modern dairies operate. A great example of this is we put a pile of haylage in a location we don't normally put it, and we covered it with tires just like we always do. And one of the neighbors thought that we just piled a bunch of old tires in the field and didn't even realize we were preserving feed underneath it.
Mm-hmm. It was a mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, they thought it was just a big pile of tires.
Yeah. Well, we're getting short on time. I want to relay to all of you that our first discussion, our first day as committee, we all spoke about that we weren't a political committee, that we were an ag committee, and that any decisions that we moved forward were going to benefit agriculture before they benefited any political will. And we've learned a lot today. I think that one of the things that we're going to work on moving forward is, we're gonna revisit the spreading of manure. I mean, we talked to, all 5 of you today, and all of you are doing direct injection, and I don't know if those, ideas were were thought of when, they made some of these rules, but, again, a new committee, you have given us a lot of knowledge, and, we are an advocate for you, and at any time, open invitation to get hold of us. I know that Kylie and I talked this morning before we got online, but we are here for you, and we will make smart decisions for you. And if there's an area that you think we need some more help on, please reach out and let us know. Well, thank you. Y'all have a good rest of your day, and we'll be talking with you. Okay, committee, I'm gonna take a break before.